Hello, my lovelies. It's Jayne here on Quantum Relationships, and I'm talking today about understanding codependency. I feel that we've talked a lot about this lately. There's a really amazing amount of insight into codependency now in our world, and that's such a great thing because people are starting to see that we can actually create certain habits in our relationships that really aren't that healthy. Sometimes we can see them and we just can't seem to shift them, and there'll be more about that on this podcast because that's actually what we're here to talk about. But first of all, thinking about codependency, and how is it that we end up in these codependent relationships? So, the way I see it, when we were younger, we started from this place of infinite joy, infinite love. We're just little babies. We feel fairly whole. We feel fairly one with everything. We are one with everything. We don't really have any mind, any thoughts, any pain, any hurts that are causing any agitation in our body. We're completely accepting of whatever life brings. And then over time, we start to develop these responses to the world around us. And often those responses are not necessarily predictable. So as a child, I could give a meaning to a certain situation, something that my parents say, and the meaning I give it is that I'm not good enough. That's quite possibly not what my parent meant, but that's the meaning that I give it. We get shown by our society that we have to be more, we get sent to school, we have to learn more, and I don't know if you're like me, but at 5 I had this experience, and I remember my first day of school actually thinking to myself, oh, actually I have to do something in order to be okay. It was like I had this realization that I couldn't just be who I was. There was more that I had to do in order to be okay. And while I didn't cognitize it like that, I can distinctly remember the feeling, which I translated in my little brain as not good enough. And of course, then I started to see that play out in so many events in my life, all the way up until a few years ago, actually. So that's a long time that I kept seeing that frame play out in my life. What happens though, when I move away from that feeling of wholeness and I separate myself from my own true nature, I feel like there's something missing. I feel like there's a disconnection. Inside, I might feel, as an adult, I might feel lost. I might feel disconnected. I might feel like there's just something that I can't put my finger on. As a child, I know that to be simply wanting to be loved. I want to be loved. I want to feel safe. And as a child, even though I'm not cognizing that, they are the emotional needs that are driving my behavior. So what I learn from society and from my parents is that if I do certain things, I'll be loved and I'll be safe. If I get grade A's, I'll be approved of. I'm getting love. I'm making sure that I'm safe. If I'm a good girl, if I don't speak up, if I do things that I know I should do, even though I don't want to, I know that I will be loved, I'll be accepted. And as a parent sometimes, and I know that I've done this, and certainly not consciously, if my child shows up in a way that I'm confronted by, perhaps my default reaction might be to withdraw the love, and I don't do that deliberately. But it's almost like there's this movement of energy where I withdraw the love in order to get them to do a certain behavior that brings me emotional comfort again. And all of this goes on just below the level of our conscious awareness, which is why it's so troublesome to see and to correct. However, not for much longer, right? So if you think about it, I've actually been taught that I have to do something or be something in order to get my emotional needs met, which is actually a fallacy because my emotional needs are feeling states, and the only person that can access my feeling state is me. So I grow up with this strategy of having to do all of these things, trying to get these emotional needs met. And sometimes I get the emotional needs met for a very short term, but then I find myself back in that same feeling of conflict or friction or frustration or resentment or not good enough or feeling unloved or feeling unsupported. What I don't notice is that every action I take is driven by a feeling. I have a feeling first, which might be I'm feeling unloved. I jump into my mind. My mind goes, oh, that's their fault because they're not doing something. So then my mind goes, we have to do this in order to get them to love us, and then we'll feel okay. So we do that. But the thing is, what I'm doing is I'm just creating a dynamic of behavior because I still haven't addressed the feeling that exists in my body. I think I am, but I'm not, because I'm trying to change something externally to fix something internally, and that doesn't work, because we know that you only have to look at your own life and the amount of repetitive cycles that you seem to have going on in any relationship, actually, whether it be work, whether it be with money, whether it be with your partner, your children, your friends. They are all dynamics of relationship which I equate to codependent behavior. And the codependency is that I am going externally to meet an emotional need that is happening inside of me because somewhere along the line I had a feeling, and rather than being there for myself and connecting with me and using it to grow and take back my power and start to move things inside me that were stuck, instead of doing that, I jump into my head to try and fix it, and I want to control something externally to make sure that I can feel okay again. That's not our fault. That's what we've been taught to do with our feelings. It's very rare that we actually get to have an emotional education. So we don't know any other way of getting our feelings met other than by creating a dynamic. Well, we don't think of it as creating a dynamic, but that's exactly what happens. A great example would be when I had my last child and she was a baby. And I remember going to my partner and I was so angry. I was resentful. I just wanted some space. I was tired. I felt unsupported. And I was angry at him. And in my resentment, I started to speak to him not very nicely. And he stopped me and he said, how do you think I can support you if you're firing bullets at me? And I thought, oh my gosh, nobody has ever said this to me. And I thought that makes so much sense. We have a feeling and we take it out on our partners, and yet they are the very people we want to help us. We want their support. And yet the only way that we know to get that is to be needy, to be angry, to persecute them, or to maybe manipulate them into giving it to us. We don't realize that there's a completely different way to get that emotional need met. So when we're understanding codependency, when we start to see the root cause of all codependent behavior, is that I simply don't know how to show up for myself. I simply don't know how to feel a feeling and allow it to process and move through my body. And I haven't been taught how to use that moment to expand my conscious awareness and emotionally evolve, so that I cease putting myself in a position to be hurt, and so I get more deliberate and conscious about the way I communicate and the things I choose to do in my life. Because this has to be an integrated way of living. It can't just be something that we go and learn in a textbook. We often can't meditate these things away, although meditation is very helpful, because we're in a human body. So we want to integrate the mind, which is the thinking, the heart, which is the emotion, the spirit and the body. We want to integrate it all. We want to be whole in our experience of this moment, because when we're whole, we actually can express our greatest creative potential. And by that, I don't mean artistry. I don't mean drawing or sculpting. I mean my capacity to consciously create the next moment of my life and to create a life that I truly and deeply desire is unlocked when I understand how to step out of those dynamics that create codependency and step back into my wholeness. So I hope this has been a great foundation for you to understand codependency. There is a journey for us to unlock the behaviors that we've set up because they were strategies that kept us safe as children. Now we need to develop some new strategies of living, for getting our emotional needs met, for meeting them ourselves, in fact. And that's a skill, and we need different tools to do that. We need to understand how to come back into our wholeness, because the separation from the essence of who we are, that presence that actually holds so much clarity and purpose for us, it's the separation from that which causes us the pain, causes us to manifest these codependent dynamics, to accept codependent relationships, to accept abuse, to accept unacceptable behavior. But the shift that's coming is inviting us back into our true state, where we actually learn how to meet our emotional needs, and from that place can go out to make relationships that create more harmony and that create deeper connection over time. I think that's really well worth aspiring to, don't you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Sending you some love.